Who wouldn't want to daily drive a Barracuda? The girls help this vehicle owner improve his ride with some AC and a new radiator. Then they see what else they can do to turn this yellow classic into a reliable daily driver.
All right. Welcome to All Girls Garage. Faye and I are out on a beautiful day cruising in this gorgeous 1969 Barracuda.
Woo! It makes you want to sing, but I will spare y'all. This is a freaking awesome car, actually. This guy just bought it. It's very clean restoration, at least what we see from the inside. And
driving great. I mean, brakes are responsive, steering's responsive. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with our first initial shakedown of this car.
Something
very
that's
big deal.
Considerable for a daily driver, especially here in the swampy south. Air conditioning.
Yes.
So we're going to be installing air conditioning on it.
Fingers crossed. We know we've been in that situation before where it looks beautiful on the outside, then you get it up in the air and you're like, ooh, not so good. But I have good feelings. I have good feelings about this one.
Me too. But yeah, right after that, I'm feeling positive. And I don't know, when you say we get this thing back to the shop and we sort of we start sleuthing a little bit.
And I say that is a fantastic plan.
Heck yeah.
And hey, look at that. Oh, look how good those brakes work. Wow.
I mean, he did a really good job picking this car out. Like,
he did. And he got a really good price on it.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah. Well, the good news is we got this in, we got it inspected, and amazingly enough, there were no real crazy surprises, no hidden gremlins. There's really only one thing that we found that is going to need to be addressed, but not bad, I'd say, all in all.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like some typical old car stuff, but the one bummer is this Cuda leak you can see dripping on the ground, which is coming from this radiator. There's actually the seam is totally rusted through, and there's no saving this thing. So we're definitely gonna have to replace that. But the good news is that we're gonna have to remove this anyway to install our AC stuff. So like we're pretty much doing half the job already. So.
Yeah, and honestly, because it's leaking, it would be incredibly irresponsible of us to put AC in this car and not with that radiator, because all that extra load on the engine is going to make the engine work harder and therefore get hotter and more likely to overheat if we've got a massive coolant leak like we do.
Yeah,
so,
not good for a daily driver.
That's got to get taken care of. But first and foremost, we have a whole bunch of new parts and pieces for our air conditioning system that we would like to show off to you and maybe explain a little bit.
That sounds good.
Look at all this pretty stuff. We gotta talk about how air conditioning systems in general work, because, you know, we don't get to take a lot of time, generally speaking, really explaining all of this stuff. So for those of you who don't know, air conditioning can be a little intimidating, but we've got all of our parts and pieces. We've got our AC compressor, we've got our AC condenser, our two different versions of receiver dryer, and
whichever
then
one looks better, I think.
Yes, I think chrome, because it matches the pretty compressor.
Yeah, kind of.
And then already inside the car is a heater box, which houses the heater core as well as the evaporator for the AC system.
And the fan. And the thermal expansion valve. So it's all like nicely, neatly packaged. We can show you in a little bit.
Yeah. So what do all these pieces do?
Why'd you start that one?
Yeah, so air conditioning is a process of basically converting refrigerant from a liquid to a gas, back to a liquid, back to a gas again. And through various stages in the process, sometimes it's high pressure, sometimes it's low pressure. But it starts out with the compressor doing the bulk of the work, right? This is taking a low pressure gas and turning it into a high pressure gas, which is going to be hot because it's compressing it. And it takes that high pressure gas and sends it out to our condenser.
Right. And this is what's going to sit like right next to the radiator, which is why we have to remove that. Anyways, and a condenser does exactly what you'd expect it to do. It goes from don't laugh at me, high pressure gas to a high pressure liquid. Liquid comes out the bottom and goes through our receiver dryer. Also like a little filter package in there, a little desiccant bag, gets out any contaminants, any sort of moisture that's like not the moisture from the refrigerator, but like moisture from the air. You're like water moisture, that kind of moisture. And then goes back to our thermal expansion valve or our TXV.
And that expansion valve is going to take our high pressure liquid and allow it to expand in a sense, but that's actually through a restriction, which sounds counterintuitive. It hits this restriction and then is opening up into a space that is low pressure. Now, it's a low pressure liquid. It's very similar to like when you open up a propane bottle, right? So you're going from a high pressure bottle, you're opening up a valve and it's going into a low pressure space, the air all around us, right? And that process actually makes it really cold. So same concept. So now our low pressure cold liquid is going to come down to our evaporator.
And an evaporator does exactly what you would expect it to do. It evaporates. So we go from that liquid to that gas, which is like basically the process of the refrigerant heating up, but it's like sort of a heat transfer. So it cools down the evaporator itself. Then, you got your blower motor. Blower motor blows air across it, so you get the cold feeling. You're all comfortable in the cabin. And then we start all over again.
Yeah, goes back to the compressor, heats it back up again, compresses. Every component is named what it does.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it compresses, it condenses, it dries, it expands, it evaporates, and then it goes back and compresses again. So when you kind of break it down, it's not actually that complicated. It's just this big cycle of things converting from high pressure to low pressure, from gas to liquid, and then back again.
Yeah. So that took a long time to explain. So I think that probably this has cooled down enough.
Yeah, probably.
All right, drain the coolant.
Let's get the radiator out. All right, what do I need here?
Wow, is there any coolant in this thing? Oh my god. Yeah, now I know why it's not draining. It is totally clogged. There is coolant up here, so the radiator is full, but it is, wow. Check that out. Alrighty, so I drain it through the lower radiator hose instead. So now I have the radiator out of the car. You can see this tank, the upper tank is actually split here along the seam. It's actually like rusted and corroded through, and that's where it was leaking from. But now that we have like the whole radiator out, we can see there's a ton of corrosion going on all four corners actually, and the fins are just like totally destroyed. So that was definitely not going to hold up to the task.
So Faye got our radiator out of the way, and God, that thing was absolutely toast. But now we have access to get out our condenser. Now, remember that we said this car originally had air conditioning, it just doesn't anymore. So it actually has a condenser in there already. You might think we could just reuse this, but you can see how the lines for the condenser are open and have been for who knows how long. And something really important about AC systems is when you're taking apart a system, you always want to cap off or seal up any of the components as quickly as possible, because any contamination that gets in there can do major damage to the whole system. Any dirt, any debris, any moisture. So really, if any component in the system is left exposed to the elements for too long, you got to get rid of it and replace it. And especially this one, we don't know how long it's been sitting at the front of the vehicle. All of that stuff just getting in there. There's no way I'm trusting that one. So we got to get that out of here. We're going to remove this panel right here and a couple of lines that are still connected on that side. Faye is working on trying to break loose right now.
They are corroded.
And then we'll be able to remove a couple of bolts holding it on and pull it out through the front. Look at all the corrosion that was in there.
Break, Bogi and Faye can start bolting in the new AC parts. And it looks like they'll have a little cutting to do on the radiator support to leave room for the fittings.
Do you have a weird rattle or funny smell coming from your power transfer unit? The PTO on some Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury vehicles are very sensitive to extreme temperatures and can often fail. Extreme heat causes a lubrication to overheat, often causing catastrophic failures, making it nearly impossible to salvage and rebuild. Extreme cold and the factory seals fail, causing oil leaks. This Dorman OE Fix PTO has been redesigned for greater resilience to thermal extremes, an added heat shield, upgraded seals, and a drain plug for easier servicing. For fleet managers, this means lower maintenance costs and less downtime.
Welcome back to All Girls Garage, y'all. Bogi and I are still working on our 1969 Barracuda, installing our AC kit on our previously AC car that's going to be AC again. So we got our condenser thing happily in here after a little bit of trial and error with these brackets. And we're sort of like doing our final mock-up of this right now.
So the new condenser that's going in is actually significantly smaller or narrower and thinner than the original one was. So there's some modification that had to happen. We could have made brand new brackets, but we decided to keep the brackets that came with it and make new holes in the radiators for it. Just was a whole lot easier. But there's actually a good reason why this condenser is smaller and thinner than the original one. It's not just because it's a universal kit. Because all of the newer, more modern components are way more efficient than the old ones. Switching from R12 to 134A, those are two different types of refrigerant, also much more effective. So, where we used to have a very large compressor on this car, we're gonna have a little bitty one, way more effective and efficient. Same thing with the condenser. Used to have a really, really big one, now we can do a little one. So, much easier kind of setup.
Heck yeah, and we're able to sort of sneak it in here quite nicely. The only problem we got going on is that these lines are hitting up against the side of this bracket. So, I mean, not a huge deal. We're just gonna notch it out.
Yeah.
You get to cut things.
Oh, yay.
Okay.
I like cutting.
Everyone's happy.
Alrighty. Make sure our notches are good.
Now that we have our condenser installed, it's time to install our receiver dryer. Up next, actually we chose the black one. Even though we sort of like the chrome, because this one already has a bracket on it. We think it's going to look nice against like the black. And with you reminding, this is like our filter. Also has a desiccant package in there, and so it receives and dries the refrigerant. Store some oil in there as well.
All right, two of our components are installed. Now we're moving on to the third, which is our compressor. Remember how I said that compressors these days are much smaller and more efficient? Well, this is still relatively large for modern technology, but it is definitely smaller than the one that came out of this car. So this whole thing is going to have to fit somewhere in our engine compartment, but of course we need a whole belt and pulley system to be able to run it. So we've got this little bracket that came with a general kit for it, and it is supposed to sit somewhere right around there. Problem is, I don't think this was really for exactly this engine, and definitely not for these accessories, because we've got a lip to our power steering bracket that is in the way of it sitting where it needs to. I can't just space it out further because then we're going to rub up against our water pump pulley. So we're going to have to get creative with some spacers, and ultimately the AC compressor is going to live right about here, which obviously you can see is going to pose some interesting challenges with some of our hosing. So we've got some creative work ahead of us on this, but I'm going to start with finding the right spacers for it. Maybe we've got some generic spacer stock that we can cut down to the exact size. So I'm going to go digging in our stockpile, see what we can figure out.
Bogi and Faye have the new bracket installed with the compressor, and next, Bogi will take us inside the cab to take a look at how all the vents are going to work to bring cold air inside.
It can be super frustrating when you hit a pothole or curb and damage your wheels, or even worse when you loan your car to someone else and it comes back, and they have not been as cautious as you are. So protect your ride and get personalized wheel protection with Alligator. They're manufactured out of a super tough nylon and engineered to sit between the tire and the wheel to protect those rims or cover up existing damage. Alligator fits 12-inch wheels all the way up to 24-inch wheels, and they come in 14 different colors, so you can match them to your car. Installation can be done at home with the proper tools, or you can take it to a local shop. Guard your wheels from those bad roads with Alligator wheel protection, engineered with teeth.
One of the things that we didn't talk about is that when our owner bought this car, he actually got parts of this kit with it, and parts of it were already installed, which is good news for us because this really tedious, boring part, which is installing and connecting all of the cables and the wiring and the linkage to the control head, all of that's done already, which is super awesome for us. So what we have to do at this point is our venting. So we've got a couple of different options for our vents. We've got a nice long one, we've got a couple of little baby ones, we've got these kind of in-between ones, and then it comes with just one long piece of our ducting. So this we're gonna wind up cutting to length, whatever we wind up needing based on where we put our vents. After playing with it a little bit, I think what I've settled on is to use this big long one and put him right about here. That's going to get as much airflow as we can and keep it out of the way of, knees bumping into it or whatnot. So that'll sit nicely and it's not in the way of our ashtray. And then we've got the two little guys. I'm going to tuck these over as far as I can and as far back as I can. And then you can adjust the angle so it blows towards the passenger, and same for the driver's side. So these are nice. A couple of holes here that I can actually repurpose. And so I've just got a couple of holes to drill, a couple to repurpose, and then we can get these in place, then take care of our ducting. That'll give us everything kind of situated. We know where everything has to live. Then we can wrangle the box in there and hook everything up. Like that. 14 inches. So now what we can do is connect it on this side, on the box side, not connected on the vent side quite yet. We'll repeat that process for all of our ducts, slide the box into place, and then connect it to the vents. About 9 inches. Just a little bit more. That should be plenty to hook up right there.
Bogi's got the ducting run to the vents, and all that's left to get this AC blowing cold is running some AC lines under the hood.
The vise is one of those tools that you're going to use virtually every day in your shop. So you want to invest in one that's going to last for a long time and be with you for the long haul. Like this benchtop hewer vise from Woodward Fab. Vise, and the hardened jaws are replaceable. So if you're working with different materials, you can put on the right jaws to protect your part. The spindle is protected and the bearings are sealed, so it's perfect for the tough conditions in your shop. You can also use the back of the rear jaw as an anvil. This Woodward Fab hewer vise will be the last one you will ever buy.
Welcome back to All Girls Garage. You can see Bogi's getting busy with the AC side, and I gave myself the easy task of running the lines to our heater core. So you may have noticed when we were installing the compressor earlier, there's just this little bypass hose. This is a coolant hose, and I'm going to be plumbing right into there with my switch. This is actually going to be electronically controlled, so there's going to be a little computer underneath the dash. Hit the switch. This is going to open up and allow warm engine coolant into our heater core, and then across the fan. The passengers will be able to feel nice warmth of the engine coolant, not the coolant itself, but the byproduct, the heat. Anyway,
Heat is good.
yeah. So our radiator just got in, so I'm gonna grab that and get plumbing.
Beautiful.
And you've got
Yes.
got the hard job.
Heat is good and simple. Air conditioning, also good, not so simple. So if you like puzzles, this is definitely a thing for you. The kit's going to come with a whole bunch of different sizes and styles of fittings, as well as a low side and a high side service port. This is where you're going to hook up your AC machine or gauge set. Now, when you do these, a couple of important things. This style is a style that has to be crimped in a special machine. It is something you can do yourself if you spend the money on the fancy machine, but generally, what you want to do is similar to when you do AN fittings. You're going to figure out your length of your hose. You're going to mock it all up as though you've actually finished the hose. Make a mark on it so you get the orientation correctly and you don't wind up with a kinked hose when you go to install it. And then send it out to somebody who has the expensive machine, and they will crimp this down for you, making it a nice, solid, rigid line, or rigidly fixed line, I should say. There's a couple of other options that we have here in setting this up. So you can run your line straight through your firewall using a rubber grommet. So just straight through. The problem with that, in my opinion, is that now I have to take the box out if I have to replace my line. So serviceability, not so good. I prefer to set up a bulkhead situation. So I've got a line from the box to this bulkhead, and then from my bulkhead to the compressor where I want it to route. It just makes it a little bit easier, more lines to make, but easier in the long run. So, but we are going to set ourselves up. I think this guy is going to work really nicely here, and this guy is going to work nicely here, like that maybe, so it routes relatively easily. So I'll mock it up, cut my lines, make my marks, send it off to get crimped down, and I got like 5 more lines to make, I think, and figure out which of these pieces is going to fit in this puzzle. So I might be here for a little while.
Our new radiator got delivered, and we got that installed on nicely. Fits perfectly up in there with our condenser. I like it. Got our new lines back, so we were able to route those all nicely around the engine, tie them back all nice. They look fantastic.
And of course, we got the heater and evaporator box tucked up nicely under the dash, got all of our ducting and venting secured. We have all of the parts and pieces in place to actually deliver some nice cold air and heat when necessary to the inside of this car.
Heck yeah, so this is one item off this to-do list to make this into the perfect swampy Florida daily driver. So that being said, we will see you